Welcome back to my VCV Rack tutorial series. Continuing on where we left off last time, let's explore more modules in the fundamental set. So last time we looked at VCO1, the VCA, LFO, and scope. Let's try to look at some of these other ones. VCO2, let's take a look at that. So it's similar to VCO1, looks thinner. It looks maybe just thinner, but there is actually a feature here that's not available on VCO1. So let's add a scope and take a look at it. So if we take the output and we route it in here, and if we, let's see, scale, make the time better. All right. So this is just a sine wave, no problem, just like we saw before. Analog and digital, just like we saw before over here. So that's all the same. FM and FMCV is the same as like what we saw before over here. Sync, same thing as what we saw over here, kind of syncs up the wave. But now there's this new thing called wave, and then an input for wave. Now if we switch this wave, let's go to a low frequency so we can see it. As we rotate this wave, see it goes from sine wave to triangle to a sawtooth to a square. So it's like a morph. It's kind of neat. So let's listen to that. Let's put this over here. So there's our square wave. There's our sawtooth, triangle, and sine. Now the interesting thing about this, as opposed to these four, is you have the CV. So now we can LFO this thing. So let's add an LFO. Let's sine wave this wave dude. So now it's like oscillating back and forth. Now it's going the full range because there's no control over the amount of the signal strength of this LFO. So let's put a VCA in front of that. So you can kind of make some weird patterns. So that's the power of LFO2, or VCO2. Alright, he's done with. Let's get rid of him. So now we know that guy. VCF I'll come back to. Let's look at LFO2. LFO2 looks pretty similar to LFO1, but again, with this wave dude. So I think it's the same stuff that we just saw. So let's increase the time. Let's watch him. Turn the wave all the way down. So now it's a sine. So it's basically the same, just a low pitch version of this guy. You know, with a wave output. So you can kind of do the same kind of shenanigans by morphing this wave shape using this input signal, just on a low frequency version. All right, so looked at that. Let's take a look at the VCF, voltage controlled filter. So to look at that, the best thing to do for a filter, in my opinion, maybe it's wrong, but I like to put them after the VCA. So let's put a low pass on there. So we have two outputs, a low pass frequency and a high pass frequency. High pass filter and low pass filter, sorry. So they take the input of that guy here and we'll go with a saw. So so he's letting low pass through right now. So now he's letting the full thing through, all frequencies. Let's also scope this so we can see what's going on. Actually, let's, the annoying thing is the scope is looking at my audio level, and that's what I don't like. Let's actually route it after. Yeah, let's reverse my decision. Let's do the amplitude after That way we can scope it while it's quiet. So there's that. Oops. And then we want to bring that into the in. So unfortunately, the scope is not a frequency analyzer, but if you had a frequency analyzer scope, it would tell you more. So we can look in here. So you can see there's our sawtooth. It's a full signal coming through. And as we tone down the frequency, it's cutting off the high pass, which basically is making it rounder. And at certain points, basically just letting through a sine wave, the bass harmonic. And at the end, it's letting nothing through. Then we have a fine-tune control, which I think is similar to what we saw with the VCO, where we can just fine-tune the frequency. We also have this resonance guy. And what resonance does is right at the cutoff point, right before the cutoff point, it's going to boost. It's going to boost that frequency. So let's listen to it. And at a certain point, like right around here, it's going to go into overdrive. And it's going to generate its own harmonic. You hear that high-pitched wheeling sound. So some people you can, and this is kind of its own oscillator right there. So you can use this as kind of a high-frequency oscillator. Filters in high resonance mode. So a common thing to do is to sweep the resonance with an LFO. Probably put a VCA in front of it. You can kind of get some interesting signals. Then of course you can LFO this frequency knob separately. Attach another LFO to it. And let's see, frequency CV. Get some crazy signals out of this thing. As it's sweeping so this is sweeping the frequency fairly quickly. So frequency CV is just the attenuverter for the frequency input. Then there's a drive knob, which is basically like a boost. And at a certain point, it goes into distortion mode. So that's it. Let's duplicate this LFO. And then do a triangle wave into this drive. I think we'll need a VCA in front of it though. So you can make some crazy stuff just with a filter and a single oscillator. And that's not even playing around with the oscillator itself. You know, then of course you could LFO the oscillator itself and make some all kinds of craziness. So voltage control filters are fun. And then, of course, this is low pass, and then high pass is the other direction. Which is probably not fun to listen to at all, because it's all high passy. Who wants to listen to high frequency sounds? Gross. All right, that's enough of the VCF. We'll keep it around, I think, because it just makes things sound better if you just kind of filter out the high frequencies. I don't know, maybe we won't. Yeah, maybe we will. I don't know, doesn't matter. All right, let's delete all this stuff. What's next? So we looked at all those. Delay. Let's check out him. So let's put in this dude. And then route this to the input. No feedback, no color. Not sure what this mix control is yet. Maybe you do need the color. Maybe you do need the mix. So I think it's trying to do a delay, but since my VCO is so simple, it's not actually showing up on anything obvious. Let's FM modulate this thing. Goes real nuts when you alter the time. Yeah, you can kind of hear it now. So if you turn off the feedback, you can kind of hear the delay kicking in. It's pretty hard to isolate. I can show a clear example, but you can hear it. It can kind of get echoey. I think this is a wet and dry mix. Yeah, this is wet and dry. So if you want the dry signal, like unprocessed, move it over here. If you want the wet signal, all the way to the other side. Color is very likely just some kind of extra madness. Full color. And you can kind of hear it. And then, of course, you can CV all these parameters and LFO them. But I think that's enough of the delay. You get the picture. ADSR we'll come back to. Mixer. This is basically a VCA, but in the format of a mixer. So you have a bunch of channels. So let's put this guy in here, in the input of channel 1. And then you can route this guy over here. Yep, not here. We can now get rid of this. Oops. Let's put back our mixer. Get rid of this guy. Hitting delete too much. Mixer. And we can route our mixer output to 3 and 4, just like we had it before. And then now we have 3 channels that we can mix together. So let's say we mix the sine wave. Let's also get back a scope and look at the output of our mixer. So there's channel 1. And here's the master volume knob. And then we control each level, the volume of each level, each channel. You know that we can put channel 2 as a triangle wave. And then let's actually bring back our VCA so we don't have to listen to this stuff. as we play around with it. We'll leave our scope over there though. Get rid of that guy. Let's put him in here. And then scope the output. That way we can crank up the output of the... So that's what we're seeing. We're basically getting... So if we do full channel 2, it's a triangle wave. If we do full channel 1, it's a sine wave, as we expect. If we add them together, it's kind of an addition of both of them. If we crank up the mix knob, it gets louder. Kind of as you'd expect. And then you can CV each of these knobs, so you can LFO them. Make some crazy patterns. Especially if you have independent LFOs. So you can see it kind of going nuts there. That's kind of neat. Anyway, that's what a mixer is. It's great for once you have multiple voices and you want to mix things together. Let's see, after the mixer, 8-vert. This is basically an 8-way attenuverter. So let's scope this guy and take a look at what he's doing. Let's get rid of this. We don't need the mixer anymore. We'll just route it directly to this guy like we've been doing. All right, so the attenuverter, so take the output and you take it to the input, and it's nothing, it's 0. Now as you crank this knob, it's basically a straight line. It's a fixed voltage. So it's basically adding and subtracting a voltage. If you route nothing in, then it's basically just a fixed voltage, which can be useful for some things based on this knob. So let's say, let's route a LFO in. Let's decrease the time so we can see it. So you can kind of see. It's kind of almost a VCA. So at 0, it's like a multiply operation. So it's taking this and multiplying it by 0. And here it's like basically multiplying by 1. So if we look at the original, there's the original. If we go all the way to positive, it's back to the original. And that's negative. So it's a multiply operation. That's the 8-vert. So you got 8 of them. All do the same stuff. Unity. So this guy, what he's doing is he's averaging or summing all these inputs. So let's take a look at him. So take the output, put him into the scope. So he's right now summing all these channels, which only has one input, and putting them in there. Now average and sum of one input is obviously the same thing, but let's put the triangle wave in another input. So now it's summing both the triangle and sine. Let's do actually square. More interesting. So you can kind of see the square shape kind of mixed in there, summing. Averaging, now it's going to average them. Now there's 2 inputs, so it's again dividing by 2. So it's just do them all. That's what it looks like if you average them all. If you sum them all, it's going to be super loud and crazy. It's off the charts. And this is the inverse. So it's the negative version of it. So if you were to monitor this one, and you route this there and this there, and you sum them, the sum of the output and the inverse, it's going to be 0. Very exciting stuff, huh? Math. So that's the unity module. Mutes. Here's another silly fun one. Basically a bunch of switches that mute things. Let's make our... Click that button, nothing. So it's basically an on-off switch, a whole bunch of them. Good if you need on-off switches. Basically a mute button for everything. You know, lots of mixers have mute buttons, so that's how you can get a mute button. Me, I just route it to a VCA and just flip it down, but I'm sure mutes are nice because it's kind of compact. Scope we've already looked at. You know, there's an X and Y. You can actually do, this is X or Y, and you click this button, and it's X plus X and Y. So if you do like here, the Y is the triangle wave. So you can kind of get some crazy patterns, which is kind of neat. I don't use that too much though. I like this pattern where you just have two overlapping. And then the trigger I don't really use. I'm not overly familiar with what the trigger does. I think it's kind of setting the stabilization point. All right, well, let's take a look at the other components. Let's bring back our scope. All right, so the only things we haven't looked at yet is the ADSR and the sequencer. Let's take a look at the sequencer. So the sequencer is a bunch of UI, but it's not too bad. There's a clock, which is how fast it's sequencing through all of these dudes. What I recommend is you right-click on this guy and you click Randomize. And that's going to shuffle all these. It's a lot easier than like bit twiddling it all, at least to learn it anyways. Then after you randomize it, bump the steps back up to 8, and then bump the clock back to some reasonable speed. And then you got to set the pattern down here to all on, but at least you've got all these randomized. So now let's go look at what this is. So there's 3 rows of 8. Row 1, row 2, and row 3. And those come out right here, those signals. So let's take a look at that. Let's adjust the time so we can actually see it. So you can see it's a stair step of different pitches. Let's also do Y. So you can see 2 different stair steps. And that's row 1 and 2. Let's get rid of Y so it'll be less confusing. Now all these different stair steps are coming from the values we set here. You know, if we turn them all way super high, then you'll see that there's a big block that are super high. Now what can you do with this? You can kind of do whatever you want in terms of modular synthesis. Let's route this to your frequency FM. So you can see kind of sequencing. Now these obviously aren't in scale. These are random voltages. So you need to use another module which isn't included in the base the stock modules, as far as I understand, to pitch correct these frequencies. Otherwise it's going to sound kind of crazy if you route it to a frequency. Same thing with your oscillators. But you can kind of get some cool patterns anyways. So here's the clock. Here's how many steps it's going. So if you just wanted to repeat a few steps, you can turn down this. Now it's only doing 4 steps. Route all the way up. Now it's doing all 8 steps. Then there's a run button you can click, and then it's not running anymore. Click the run button and it's running. Click the reset button and it resets back to the beginning. You can also automatically reset using this guy. You can adjust the clock automatically using that guy. This is an external clock, Maybe this is the run button. This is, you can set the steps using an LFO. And then there's 3 sets of pitches. There's also a gate. Let's take a look at the gate in the... So the gate is firing basically every once in a while. Harder to hear, but you can use the gate to like trigger things. So it's a spiky event. And that gate is based on what you set down here, I believe. So I think the gate will fire less often. You can also use these. Let me turn off this run. So you can click down here, and this turns on and on. The turns on or off the gate for each of these columns. It does not stop, as far as I understand, this row from outputting a value. So let's look at that. Let's get rid of that, and then output this, and then run this guy. See, all the notes are still triggering, even if the gate, even as the gates are different. Even though some of these notes are off, so it doesn't stop the rows from outputting it. It changes this gate dude. You can also trigger things based on just this one. When it comes around, it will fire there. Excuse me. So that's most of the sequence 3. We'll put him to the side. Let's take a look at the ADSR. So the ADSR is a attack, decay, sustain, release filter. One way to actually use this guy, a very simple way, is to hook him up to a square wave LFO. So you're basically, if you were to look at this square wave, zoom in the time, it's going to go kind of like that based on some LFO. Let's slow it down. All right. And then we're going to look at the output of this guy. So what the attack, decay, sustain, release guy does is he's great for like panning volume, essentially based on these settings. So attack, if you turn it all the way up, he should attack quickly. Actually, all the way other way. So he's attacking. So if I can stop this moving, you can see it spikes straight up as soon as the note hits. As soon as this gate fires, he goes all the way to max volume. That's what the attack does. As you roll this further, the attack takes longer and longer to reach. It's how fast the attack is. See how he's slowly reaching the max? That's the attack rate. So we'll leave him at max just to explain the rest. Then there's the decay. This is how long it takes to reach. It's this slope right here, this little slope right here, how long it takes to reach the sustain. So at max, it takes a long time to reach the sustain. At minimum, he's real spiky. So you can see there's a real sharp spike, and here is like just a sharp ding. So we'll leave him midway so you can kind of see the slant right here, that little slant right there. And then the sustain is that level right there. And you can see it kind of go all the way down and all the way high up. And then the release is once the gate is done, then how long does it take to hit the bottom? So if it's all the way over, it's instant. So there's no release time. It's just flat out gone. And then if it's a high release, it takes a long time, and a new note might re-trigger. So the effect of this is it makes it sound really good, like you're hitting a real piano key or whatever. So let's put this in the mix and actually hear what it sounds like. Let's take this output and put them into the volume. Let's also put them into, we can get rid of this blue line now that we've looked at it. Let's route this up a bit faster. So you can hear that hitting the attack really quick versus it taking a long time for it to attack. So here's the sustain all the way down, so it you generally don't want an instant sharp spike, otherwise it does a clip. So this is almost like a square wave, where it's adjusting the volume just like a square wave. So you can kind of make a more piano feel to an oscillator. Every time a key is hit, every time a note is played, you can trigger this ADSR and things will fire. Okay, so let's say you want to use an ADSR with your sequencer. So if you remember, the gate is a single spike. So if we look at this gate, you can see a single spike, which doesn't really work well with an ADSR. So if you were to hook up this ADSR to the output, you can see it's not firing, because unlike what we had before, it doesn't give this this gate enough time. So to fix that, you have to right-click on the sequencer 3. So you right-click the sequencer and there's a gate mode. So you can either do retrigger or continuous. So retrigger will refire it every time. So let's take a look at that real quick. So let's look at this gate over here. So you can see it's on-off because of my on-off pattern here. Now let's set a bunch of these on. So you can see there's actually still a spike. There are spikes when it's re-triggering, because it's hitting off and then it's going back on, even between these two notes that are on. Now if you want continuous, then there's going to be no spikes. It just stays up, stays high. So let's try the both ways and see which one sounds better, if they sound different. So let's also put this in the level in. Let's try retrigger. I have a feeling retrigger is going to be better. Yeah, you can hear that right here, because the ADSR is actually doing retriggering. And you can see what the ADSR is doing there. So basically ADSRs are really good for trying to get more of a piano or kind of instrument feel. So that's that. So I think with that, we've actually explored all the fundamentals. Let's take a look. So if we go to fundamentals, so we talked about the VCOs and the VCF and the VCA and the LFOs and the delay and the ADSR and the mixer and the invert and unity and mutes and scope and sequence 3. So I think we're done with the fundamental section, which is good. Only thing we haven't covered from the really kind of basic stuff is the core. So we looked at the audio interface, but we haven't looked at any of these MIDI 2 CVs or whatever. I'll look at that in another video maybe. We'll real quick look at these ones. So blank, that's just a blank module, does nothing, just for fun. Notes is kind of a notepad where you can type stuff. Hello world. This is good if you have a kind of a complex patch and you want to actually remember what you're doing, or you want to share it with others and you want to kind of give instructions or whatever. So that's that. And I think that concludes our episode. Thanks for watching. See you next time.